In this episode, this Heritage Month, we talk about the new South African revolution. We look at how South Africa is being perceived by the rest of the world, what needs to change, and how exactly do we do that? Hi everyone. Today we're talking about the new South African revolution. What exactly is South Africa known for today? Do we need a revolution? Is there a revolution that's happening at the moment? Are we finding South Africans who are already changing, making the changes that we need to make as ordinary South Africans and not depending on our leadership to make those changes? And joining us, wow, am I a lucky girl today. I have two SAMA award-winning musicians joining me today to discuss this because they tell their stories, they tell our story in this country, and they tell our story around the world. Let's say hello to Philani, Bubu, SAMA award-winning folklore singer and songwriter, and a marvelous teller of tales. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having
me. And then
me.
we have this guy, Jay Something of Mikasa fame, also SAMA award-winning musician, and a restaurateur, and he denies he's a chef, but he can cook. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, and so glad to have the two of you. Maybe we'll get you singing at the end of all of this. So, Philani, I had the pleasure of meeting you very recently before this, before we did this, and hearing some of your folk songs as well, which I hadn't heard before. You're obviously passionate about folklore and preserving heritage for generations to come in the last chat that we had. Tell us more about Philani Bubu and why telling these tales, why do they matter to you?
Sure. I was born and raised in the Transkei. As some may know, was a homeland during apartheid. So I grew up in a very special environment where being raised in Mthatha, kind of 20 minutes beyond that, you'll be in the village at any point in time. So
I'm a village girl too, so it's okay.
I dabbled between the village and the town space.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's kind of where I was culturalized. But also, kind of growing up during that time, we were very much exposed to the world and the global space. So I'm also a very global child, and I really enjoyed traveling. And when I started my music career, it came from such a global space, kind of us reaching out and being influenced by American culture and R&B and MTV and pop rock.
Jeez,
I mean, some of my first songs were pop rock.
You're that young. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Hey! So what happened was, in the beginning of my career, I then, wrote music that was an expression of all these things, all these genres of music that influenced my life. And I started traveling as soon as I recorded my first EP, second project. And as I traveled, I saw myself through different eyes. I had to take a different point of view and point the compass back to South Africa. Because when you're in the world, in a world full of different cultures and different people, what matters the most is your story and your culture and your people.
But what was happening that you had to point yourself back?
So essentially, I was performing my projects, which were all written in English and were all very much influenced by R&B, Motown, soul, and jazz and funk, which is very readily available in the world. And so telling stories that were personal, but not yet about my people and me. And so I started an identity journey, I guess. I started digging deep into kind of where I was coming from and interweaving some of the stories and the songs that I used to hear as a little girl and sing into my repertoire. And so that birthed the idea of folklore.
Which is quite a change from rap and R&B and MTV, and then you come to folklore.
I think I'm still one and the same person. And so it's been this trying to find ways to express my identity without losing a sense of, of my journey in itself. So it's very, very contemporary. And so that's kind of what birthed Folklore Chapter 1 and brought me back to my culture and telling stories. And a part of it was that I also write beyond sort of singing. I'm a poet and a spoken word artist, and I felt like I had more to say. And so in creating a project that had a bit of spoken word, lots of storytelling and music, helped me say more within the music. And so, the project Folklore was birthed. And that project...
How long has it been going on for now?
2019 was when I released the first album series.
Okay.
2020 was when I started the first Folklore for Kids, Folklore Firesides, and then birthed the festival in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So yes, you run that festival.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And it's so great to, your honesty I appreciate, is that you felt like it almost sounds like you were losing yourself a little bit when you went away and then you had to pull yourself back a bit. But you've managed to integrate the two very well.
I wouldn't say losing myself. I think it's like just upweighting other conversations that needed to be had.
Okay.
I think, we all can write about very many different things. I still write about love. I wrote an R&B project called Lockdown Love Story.
When do we ever stop writing about love?
Released it last year. But at the same vein, I still can write about the stories I'm hearing about my people, or the things I want to say about my culture, or about social issues as an activist. I think we are very diverse beings who live in different ways and facets. And I wanted to kind of be a part of the storytelling within how we're reframing our identity.
Okay, well, I'm sure you two, your paths have crossed. Jay something. Now I know why you've got the something, because most people probably can't say the rest. It's João de Fonseca. Have I got that right? João de Fonseca. You Portuguese?
Portuguese.
Ah, okay, so I got that right. Hey, but you're more than Mikasa. You are more than Mikasa fame, right? We know your passion for music, and now your passion for food as well. You're a restaurateur. What's happening in your world right now? What are you busy with? What's going on in Jay Something's life?
Yeah, constantly exploring my potential. I guess I'm very intrigued by what I'm capable of, and very passionate about the time that I have, and very aware of, not knowing when it will come to an end. So I live one day at a time and I try and maximize it all. I'm constantly
But you have a talent. It's never going to come to an end unless you lose your voice completely, Yeah,
I think, just I'm on a mission. What am I up to? I could dive into 1,000,001 things. I just taking one day at a time.
Well, tell us the legal things you are up to. The illegal stuff, don't tell us.
Got a restaurant in Sandton, which is a lot of
Yes,
fun.
I know. I checked. Yes, and
Artistry.
I was checking out the menu because I said maybe that's the next place to actually treat myself to.
Yeah, you should both come by. You should
we should both come by. We all invited. All invited.
Okay,
we're all invited to your
As you
restaurant.
are always with restaurants. Everybody's always invited.
Everyone's always invited. So tell us about the journey from music into food. I mean, obviously Portuguese, I know. I mean, I'm Indian. I know the thing is very similar. So you as well, very similar. Food. But tell us about what led you down your path.
Music, I think these are things that all help us to find what we call our culture. I think it plays a great deal of forming the boxes that we kind of fit ourselves into. But food, I grew up with my mom and dad, both in the food industry. And then,
what do they do?
My dad did food and beverage for many hotels around the world, and then my mom owned a restaurant for about 18 years.
Okay.
And then 2 years into my music career, I just needed something to just help me to sort of relax and have some time. And I started cooking with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And ever since then, just started posting online, and this thing turned from a hashtag to front door of a restaurant.
And you're still singing?
Never will stop.
Never
Been
will
singing
stop.
since I was a young kid. I've always loved it, and still going with Mikasa. Still got new music coming out and touring.
Oh yeah?
Just came back
Tell
from
us
Europe.
a little more.
It's strange because it's 13 years now into the industry, and I think that it tends to become a bit repetitive to myself. But new music, new songs, and new ways of sort of trying to create stories in a very different way.
Yeah. What messages are you telling? What messages? I don't want you to give away too much, but what are you saying now about
if it were to be compared, which I don't really like the idea of comparison, because I think we're very much individuals, all of us.
Yeah.
I try and take a very personal approach to my music, but still understand that I need to make it relatable to people. The idea of pop music. I love pop music. I think it's got a massive way to impact a lot of people. Just trying to hide a little bit of my personal story so that when I listen to it with my wife, she's like, you put that in. So it's a lot of fun. And then getting to use that to connect with people, shine a little bit of light, positivity, and give people love. It's always been the
So when's this
memo.
new music coming out?
We just released a song about three months ago, and then next year we'll release an album.
An album next year?
For early next year, yeah.
Okay.
If all goes according to plan.
New Year present
to
for
our
all
plans.
of us.
Yeah.
Well, you obviously guys have had amazing collaborations. I'm sure you've collaborated and you've traveled a lot as well to showcase your heritage. And I just want to know, when you're out there, how do you feel about telling people you're South African and the South Africa that you're living in now, Philani? You had that experience, you told us a bit about it in the beginning. Tell us more.
Yes, I have. I think that South Africa is seen in good light. I mean, of course, there's the issues of the crime and the safety of South Africa. And I think that international media will always blow out the real experience. You can only really understand a place until you're here. And sometimes we as South Africans don't realize that actually when we're living behind locked doors and big fences, that it's not the norm for others. But I think we're a unique place that's positively loved as like the dance capital of the world. I like to say South Africa's the dance capital of the world. We're always coming up with new dances.
Oh, new dances for everything. Yeah.
We're amazing with dance, music, and movement. And I think that's just kind of the new way that we're expressing our freedoms, because I think there's various ways that we've expressed freedom. And I think we're just in that era of like freedom of movement and just kind of letting go. We're also like the design capital of the world. A lot of people look to us for fashion and look to us for interior design.
Yeah, yeah.
And architecture. And I think we're making a good name for ourselves in many different facets, whether it be the music, the design, the dance, genres in themselves. I'm a piano, com.
Yes, yeah.
And I think one of the most standing brand names or household names in South Africa, you know, the ones that come up the most will always be Nelson Mandela, Hugh Masekela, Mary Makeba.
Yeah.
And I think our activism and our sense of change and our sense of how we're projecting into the future and who we are as a people based on how we've kind of developed our peacemaking and how we're transforming, I think we're very well known for that. I mean, we have some of the best constitution in the world, so.
We do, we must use it.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
And Jay, something, I mean, you're thriving, obviously. You've got a new album coming out, Restaurant. So how do you feel about the South Africa you live in? And when you travel abroad, is there ever a moment where you feel like you're ashamed because they go, oh, that's, you know, we're talking about corruption. We're talking about a company, a country that people say is almost another Zimbabwe, you know? Do you have that moment of like...
I must say, like, I go anywhere I go, I feel extremely proud.
You're proudly South African still. Both of you proudly South African, yeah?
Very much so, yeah. I think that I also travel a lot and get to see how unique we are. And also when you travel, you get to see how great of a life we live, despite everything else that might be on the headlines. I don't travel with the headlines in mind. I travel with my personal experience. I have a great life. I love what we're about. I love the flavor and the energy that is in this place, and you travel with that.
Yeah. And what are the things that, or the misconceptions you find among people abroad when they find out that you're South African?
Wow, misconceptions.
That we walk around with lions.
That one's still, that's an old one now.
Oh,
that's an old one. Yeah.
What is the new version of that? There's definitely got to be a new version of that. I mean, there's definitely certain questions that are asked that are not, do you know what I mean, that are just a little bit ignorant. No, it's not just about Mandela. I do think that any country in Africa, you know, there are some countries that have more visual airtime than others.
Yes.
And I think it's hard to visualize until people come here and they realize how much infrastructure we have, and, you know, it almost feels European, as they would call it.
Do they feel that we're all just very rural? Is that the impression
Yeah, that's
you get?
generally the sense, is that, you know, we're living in huts and we have dusty roads, and a bulk of us are poor, which is true, but there's also so much else going on.
There's so much else.
Yeah.
And when you go home to
I
Portugal to
literally
visit the
went
family...
a month and a half ago and somebody asked me if we walk around with animals, wild animals. So as old as it might be to you, it's still happening. But yeah, I think that...
when you visit your family in Portugal,
that's
when
what
you
I
go
get.
to the...
Yeah. Is it safe?
Tell me
Is it
what they
safe?
want to know.
I guess it's just around safety, and I think that when you look at global news, you kind of see, not that I spend a lot of time on the news, but I think that that's the perception that they're getting. Which is to some extent quite true,
you know? Corruption, crime, corruption, rural, dusty roads, animals, hungry children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the unsafety of it is definitely high up there. I mean, we've clocked a few, outside of our living standards and the disparity between like the rich and the poor, I think we've really clocked some kind of record on like crime, which is, and murder capitals and rape capital of the world. These things are said about South Africa.
Here's the big question I want to ask both of you, okay? Do you believe that there is a new SA revolution in terms of South Africans themselves trying to create what our leaders have failed to actually create for us and making this a South Africa to really, really be proud again? Whether they're doing it through food, whether they're doing it through music, which is what you're doing. However, do you believe that do you see it happening with those that you speak to, those you interact with, that there are people who are saying we need to show up for ourselves? And then I'm not talking like the French kind of revolution, like let them eat cake. I'm talking about like a proper new way of thinking when I say essay revolution, just to be clear.
I would say South Africa has gone through a revolution. We're kind of evolving on a particular trajectory of learning. We're a very infant country. I don't know how to count now. 1994, is it now what, 28 years?
Decades.
It's not 30 years?
It's almost 30
That's
years,
a baby
Next
country.
year, 30 years,
We're a baby country that's trying to figure things out. And out the gate, as soon as this country was birthed, as it is now, so much has happened and kind of been out there. If I think on the music landscape, because it's quite nice to look at music as like
and especially you telling the
as
stories
how
you
music,
tell of days of old.
and where it's coming
know?
from. It's funny, I did a talk like this in France, and I was trying to paint South Africa and all the like different facets that are happening.
What did you tell
but
them?
How
I'd
did
love
it
to
grow
know.
out of it? No,
Yeah.
but think about the 90s. We were in that kind of like euphoric state of a new country. So Kwaito, house music, all the music, Afropop was just a celebration of that. And I think that's when the kind of struggle songs kind of tapered down.
Yeah.
Now, then we went through the African Renaissance when Thabo Mbeki was in power. That's also not the word.
Well,
do you remember the African
was
Renaissance?
around. He was
I am
here.
an African.
He
I
was
owe
here.
my being to the valleys and my
He was
president.
here. He was here.
But
We'll just
do
say he
you
was
see what
here.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
essentially at that time, we went into kind of the visual language of what it means to be African, the African identity, African music. And that started to shape certain new genres, I'd call them new genres, but they evolved through jazz. So in the jazz space, there's a lot of like bringing back in improv into the indigenous space, indigenous sounds. And now we kind of then start to get bucketed into world music, it's fine, but it's kind of, we started to get a little bit more rooted. So 90s to 2000s, we were still very much bandanas, Americas. Expressing ourselves in
Sneakers.
celebration of ourselves, and hip hop was also such a cool way to do
The world
that,
had
which was
opened up to
embedded
us,
into
yeah?
Kwaito.
Yeah.
And then we went through this African Renaissance, which is very much African, especially you could see it across fashion, you could see it across design. I think where we are in kind of the new stage of the activism, is understanding is trying to find the pride in the leadership. I do believe that our leadership is not as strong as it used to be. And I do...
You're not alone in that belief.
I'm and I'm answering the question, so I'm gonna I'm trying to kind of keep it, it's not revolutionary for me, it's just a trajectory of learning. We've learned that maybe some of the tools and the policies that were developed were not the right tools and policies in order to bring about the kind of change. And I don't think that we owe the poverty of the country to what our leadership is doing now. We owe the poverty of the country to a lot that's still pending and missing to restore what was taken away from a group of people. Except now it's just more disparate because we've created more rich people and more, poor folks. We need to understand what bridges that gap, whether that's education.
And that's what I want to talk to you about in a couple of minutes, because it's about what opportunities we're missing. So you can think about that one while I ask Joao, and I'm going to say...
I'm not gonna lie, man, I'm listening to you guys talk and I'm so blown away by it all.
I want to know what you think because, you know what, and I'm just going to put it out there, people go, white boy, got into a band, that kind of
I
thing.
don't really
Maybe
care
there was
what
that perception.
No, like I said to you earlier on, like titles are given to us.
Yes.
The titles are not often birthed from ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I have a very good relationship with myself. So I don't really mind.
Yes.
People say a lot of things about all of us,
Of
and
course
that is
they are.
okay.
And me too. You
cannot
don't know.
control. And I think that that's actually to the point of this discussion is that,
In
I
terms
think
of the
that
revolution.
is there a revolution going on? I think depends on the definition of revolution. I think that there's constantly change going on. I think maybe not as drastic as we would want it to be. Although sometimes I see like some drastic things going on. Where
What? Like what? Tell me, please.
Well, I mean, I'm
What's
not too much of like a politician, and if that's where change
Thank
kind of
goodness for
begins,
that.
I wouldn't be the fundi. But definitely from the outset, I do see a lot of when I don't see us having people that we actually place confidence in. That maybe tells me that there's something bubbling that actually needs to burst. I don't know where to put the trust.
When you have people who don't actually want to go out and vote and don't bother.
Yes, I mean, like I
they
have
don't know,
no
there's no,
idea
like,
where to turn. And I think that that builds frustration, and either that makes us go towards somebody that maybe is just the next option, or it allows us to birth something new. And again, I'm not a politician, so I hope that there are people out there that are trying to do or bring something new, maybe with a younger energy and that sort of thing. But I think when you're talking about music and revolution, I've been feeling a huge sense of an African revolution musically across the globe. You know, like you mentioned in the 90s, it was America. It feels like it's the complete opposite now.
Yeah.
It feels like America and Europe is just looking to Africa because we have this unique thing that nobody else is doing or using. And I think that we now, and this is where I feel that there is this sense of revolution, definitely within the art space, is that people are actually now for the first time saying, this is what I sound like. This is what I look like. This is how I vibe out. And either get in line or go somewhere else. You know, I look at like, I was born in Portimão in the south of Portugal. And one of the biggest events that happen in Portimão is Afro Nation. And it's thousands of Africans.
Can you tell us the next time when it's on?
Yeah,
when does it happen?
I will let you know. I actually have no clue, but once a year. Once a year it happens in Portimão.
I've never been to Portugal, so it'll be a treat.
And I mean, that in itself is just like a huge sense of how far African culture is traveling. And a huge part of that is South African. You'll see a whole stage of thousands of people dedicated to a certain sound that was birthed here. And that for me feels like a bit of a revolution within the art space. And I think that allows us to showcase who we are as a people without having it to be too deep and like, you know, almost unrelatable to an extent. Like I have great conversations just about how great we are. And I think people can see that from the outside when they get to Afro Nation or something.
I think that the music and the art is a depiction of our persistence, ingenuity, but also and it being a revolution it's an expression in itself. It's just like a relentlessness, a despite. I think that, I mean, it's a kind of, any emerging country has this sense of hope and this sense of happiness. We, outside of the West, or as Africans, somehow, despite everything, whether that could go wrong, power cuts to whatever it may be,
get through it, man.
we have a way of staying positive, do you know? And I think that if you can look at art and art is alive, that means that we are a people that can still express themselves. And that means that whatever's happening in the positivity and in the activist type artists, because we do have activist artists.
Yes,
I won with my red hat. You know, we speak of certain social issues, whether those issues are domestic issues, domestic violence, whether those
Whatever
issues are just women and children, whether those issues are the youth unemployment, etc. And as long as art is alive, it just means that there is a conversation happening. There's some change. There's some shift happening. You know, and I think that also even in the spaces where it's just joy and we're not talking that deep, those things are also indicative of the feeling that South Africans are wanting to have. And it's so contagious, it's rubbing off on the world. Like, we will dance. We will move. We ask for no permission. And that means that for as long as the art space can do that, I think we're going to continue as South Africa to problem solve. To stay positive and to find a new way.
Okay, so Philani, you tell stories, your folklore stories, you tell stories from centuries ago, from decades ago. If you had to write a folklore song now about South Africa and where we are in 2023, okay, I can't ask you to write a whole song for me now, right? But if you had to think about it and what the idea behind that folklore song would be, what would it be? You think, I'm coming to you next. I'm giving you got extra time to think about it. Yeah, what would it be?
So, South Africa, as diverse as it is, it means that there's a diverse number of things that we have to say, or things that we want to depict and say about ourselves. And folklore, by definition, are like these customs, beliefs, jokes, proverbs, tales. It's inclusive of many art forms that are passed through generations by word of mouth. Luckily, today, in modern day society, we have the technology of music, just MP3s, things that we can basically document to like do this
just put
whole
it straight
thing.
on this, just sing it on this phone and
Right. So
spread
if
it
you
around.
think of a song 30 years ago that means something today, it means that 30 years from now, whatever I write about today becomes folklore. Right? And so it's a depiction of the time, what the people are saying, how they believe and what they think of themselves.
Just give me one idea. What would you say?
He just wants one idea. I'm about to paint a couple.
Oh, great. Give me more.
And I'm going
give me more.
You know, I'm gonna talk from a place that's already personally lived and is currently happening. So my project, Folklore Chapter 2, is all about African spirituality. And I think that a lot of people are trying to find this place that they identify as home. Whether that thing is to understand rites of passages, rituals, a connection connection or communion with their ancestors, or just being closer to their elders and learning. I don't think that we're doing enough intergenerational dialogue. I think even between leadership now and people, there's something to be said about having a conversation between young and old.
Yes.
I think we look at like the political parties as like the veterans, yes, the MKs, the people who fought for our freedom, but are they really like in conversation with us in order to take us into the future?
Are over it, if I had to say it.
So there's that. And then I've also just written a project in collaboration with a group of people from Burkina Faso and France around South Africa, looking through the lens of strong South African women and believing that, at this point, we are looking at women as nurturers of life, as womb bearers, as these people who can nurture us into the future. Other than that, it just kind of takes a focus on like youth unemployment. It looks at just inequality, the inequality we still face. And those are the gaps that we're trying to bridge. I don't know what the future is going to look like.
Yeah, well.
as like that being a study of folklore at a time. But yeah, just like looking at how Philani as people, and it addresses the idea, not in a way where we keep cheesing up the idea of Ubuntu, but really understanding and unpacking what it means to have community, good neighborliness. To grab the youth by their hands and to go forward with them, because there is no forward without them coming with us. I just, maybe if you want me to sum it up in one theme, I honestly would say it's about that intergenerational dialogue and not just dialogue lineage. Like, how do we make sure that there is a dot that's connected, like from the elder to the younger person into the future?
And the different beliefs.
Right.
And
I
the different
think
expectations.
That could look at certain things in South Africa, where that be how we evolve certain industry, how we grow the future leaders,
and how women have come to see, stepped into their own power, are
how
stepping
women have stepped
into their own
power. Yeah.
Joao, your turn. Okay, what would Jay Something and Mikasa, what would they write about if they had to write about South Africa in 2023 for the next album?
I once got the opportunity of spending 5 days in a car in Tsitsikamma with Brahim Masekela.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a mission
lucky you.
that was to write a song about South Africa. And I wrote a song called Heaven in You. And I think that song for me, as much as I try to think of all the things that are going on, I think that one of the things that we do really well, and you can put it in so many different words, but I think we all find a little piece of heaven inside chaos. And I think that for me, it's a real great depiction of my experience in South Africa, is that there can be so much going on around me and out there, but I'm always able to find this little place that I can say, wow, heaven on earth. Like there's so many moments in my day that I have these type of moments. And I know that as fun, but still, I still find so much in common. And I choose to spend a lot of my energy and my time on our commonalities, not being obviously ignorant to our differences, but I think that we have got so much more in common. Obviously. But I did write a song about South Africa. It was Heaven in You with Brahim Masekela. It's out there.
It's out there.
On the spaces.
It's out there. Okay, we're going to find that. It's out there. So, you've both achieved so much in your spaces. And, you were talking, Philani, earlier about finding the missing links. And I know one of them for you would be the intergenerational conversations that need to happen. But what do you think are the opportunities that we have missed that, could have made us a greater nation than what we are right now?
Well, heavy, loaded. Because when they are missed, it means that we can't come back to recover them. What are the opportunities that exist?
Or we could be seizing, have missed, or should be seizing at this point?
I think that when you are coming straight out of trauma, and you also have a fusion of cultural mix that's quite like, we're a very humble society and have a lot of humility. And I want to encourage South Africans to have even more of a sense of ownership of the things that we are good at, of the things that we create, of the things that we put out into the world. And I think we make assumptions as to like how they land. Simple, we'll come back to the music, the conversation between piano and Afro-piano. And it's just simply the idea of like, how do we build industry? I think the opportunity to look at now is how we're building industry, whether that be in the creative economy or how politics affects, economics affects industry. And I think the opportunity to look at or that exists is understanding like ecosystems and industry by taking ownership And I think humility is one thing, but not at the loss of like a possible gain. Do you know? And, you know, even so many industries in South Africa have grown, but I'm just not entirely sure that we actually take ownership. I can't say who's sleeping on who. I don't know who the champions of industry are, but I do think that as South Africans, if the word still is, we're just a Madiba country and the world is just the country that forgave.
Rainbow Nation.
Exactly. If that's still the word, and I would say that we're not speaking loud enough about the good things. We're not speaking loud enough about the industries that we are pioneering and changing.
And that's the point of the new SA revolution. That's exactly what we need to create. What do you, Joao, think that where we're missing, where we're not grabbing, where we're not seizing, what are we not doing enough?
I think the first thing that popped to mind, funny enough, came to mind was words that I heard from a person that I think, a South African, that I think is doing phenomenally overseas, and it's very how do you say, maybe like more street words, but he said trust your dopeness, and it was black coffee. And when I see Natsi and what he's doing and how I think the people around him, the Latumas, the Nelson Makamo, and so many other people, I think that these are Africans that are trusting their vibe.
Yeah.
And I think just to add to Peace Point, I think it's just that it's I do think we have the need for, and I think it's also a lack of confidence, but we get into a point where we need to be able to be more confident in who we are, and it is there. It feels like it's a little tipping point at the moment.
There's nothing wrong with a little bit of ego. Humility is great.
Yeah.
But I also feel there's nothing wrong with a bit of ego.
Yeah. I think that like recently just going overseas now with Mikasa and just, I think for the first time ever, and we've been doing it for 12 years, going abroad, I think for the first time ever, there was this new sense of pride saying, we from Africa, you know, and I think
that's nice to hear.
That was cool, you know.
That's nice to hear. Okay, so I'm almost putting you at the end of your torture, answering all these loaded questions and making you think of your next songs and albums and all of that.
Edit ourselves.
And, so it's Heritage Month. Philani, as a storyteller, what is your wish for South Africans this Heritage Month, especially in the context of this new SA revolution that we want to happen? We know it's there, but we want it to grow and grow and grow and be bigger and make us great.
Out of the observation of the month itself, I still think that we don't see the holistic picture of our heritage. I think we live in isolated ideas of ourselves and each other, and in kind of pursuing success, which can lead to capitalism and lead to, all these things that influence things like affluency. There are certain little nuances of Africanness that we take for granted. And I do believe that if we held on to every single thing that does make us us, without the boxes, without the, the confinements, the divide and conquer and all of that, I do believe that there's a certain kind of identity and heritage. And I'd hate to say it's kind of like when Swahili embraced East Africa, but it's like South Africa needs this thing that brings us all together, even in our diversity, that allows us to have the kind of confidence that we're talking about, the kind of identity that allows us to stand together. And I think it's that standing together that's probably one of the solves that can help us find, that confidence in like owning it, within ourselves. So within heritage, I'd say that we do need to kind of lean in a lot more into like our inheritances, into some of the things that, were demonized through colonialism, whether that's African spirituality, whether that's like our traditions. I don't think we feel safe enough yet. I don't think we're there. I think even when someone says the word ancestor, it's already a bit, almost,
Yeah.
It's so funny using these words in like opposite ends of the spectrum. To say that we don't, it's not building the right confidence in our children doesn't mean we have the low self-esteem. I think we just take it for granted and we don't, I don't want to say that, love ourselves enough. She has a way of saying all these words that are just so extreme. But we gotta love ourselves just that much more. We gotta love ourselves that much more, have even more confidence, and just speak louder, prouder, and unembarrassingly. I don't know. I think that's kind of my wish for South Africa and everything
And
that
then
is
you can just
a
host
gift in the
one
heritage.
big, humongous festival for the whole of South Africa, everywhere. The festival, just make it one big one, and then Joao can be there as well. Yeah.
Next year, September, Heritage Month, Folklore
Yeah.
Festival.
Can you guys please just like plan this whole nationwide festival? Jay, something or Joao? I just like saying Joao.
Wow.
What is your message? What is your wish for South Africans this Heritage Month so that we can create all of that and make all of this happen and love ourselves and create this new SA revolution where we're not just put into the boxes we were in the past?
You know, a wish is one thing, and then it's the other thing whether it would be granted. You know, I think that my wish would always be for more love and more light. I think that for me, that's not cheesy at all. It's really what we need. I think it's really what is relatable. I think it's really what's understandable. And I think if we could just give each other that, would be amazing. I always find Heritage Month and Heritage Time to be quite confusing for me because I don't identify myself as Portuguese or South African. I'm on a mission to try and unbox myself as much as possible so that I can see.
Are you just every
Because
man?
I even think, no, well, I mean, to an extent, yes. I would say that quite unashamedly, because I think that even when we look far back, there is still further back that you could have looked that maybe it's just undocumented. And I think we have to choose a starting point when it comes to this. And I think when I look beyond and when I look at the idea of a starting point, you know, it's so hard to understand where we all came from and how all of these things got placed together. But what I am more passionate about is humanity as a whole. I think that, you know, I think that we should just be there for one another a little bit more. We should care a little bit more.
Because we know we can as South Africans. We have done it.
We should be kinder a little bit more. I live in an industry that's very weird. You know, I think a lot of people have got these egos bigger than, you know, the world itself. And I think it's just understanding that we're nothing without people. We need one another. And I think in Heritage Month or not, I live in a home where my wife is Tswana, I'm Portuguese. You know, my kids are a bit of both. Then there's my mother, then her mother.
Can you imagine
just
Sunday
like,
lunch at your house?
It's magical.
Like what's on the table?
It's
everything.
magical because it's not. It's got no box. It's just one happy gathering around a time to celebrate
I love that.
humanity.
I love that picture that you've just painted in my head. Yeah, that's great. Well, Philani, Joao, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to that nationwide festival.
The oneness of
The oneness.
dopeness.
Yes.
Oneness of
I'm
dopeness.
tasking the two of you with creating the festival. Thank you so much.
Thank
and happy
you.
Heritage Month to the two of you.
Yes, likewise.
You too.